Hi, Ray Dickey from South Carolina CAI, Hudson Valley CAI Association up now. We're involved in a lot of states. You know where you're from, so I'll leave it up to you to keep that to yourself if you want to. Today, we're going to do hoarders. Nobody likes hoarders. I mean, I feel sorry for them, but I don't think anybody likes having them. And they're a problem. And I learned yesterday, they're very difficult to get rid of. Now, maybe Noelle will come up because she's like a genius and she comes up with great ideas. And maybe Noelle will make it easy, but I don't know. This hoarder situation just sounds like a nightmare to me. Then we're going to do police requests. Like, hey, I'm here. I'm looking for Bob. Is Bob been around? Should you answer that or shouldn't you answer it? Hey, can you let us in? We want to go see if Bob's by the pool. How much should you comply with the police? Because can you get yourself in trouble by doing so? And then if we have time, we'll do Q&A. Before I do anything else, I am going to launch the poll here. If you are here for CEUs, click yes, whatever one you need. You know, the Florida and the Illinois ones, they do take us like a little while to process. So just keep that in mind. They're not like instantaneous. At least like probably 7 to 2 weeks on Florida by the time I wait for the info to come in and then we send it to the state. And Illinois is probably about a week. So just keep that in mind, but click away on whatever you need. I'm going to close the poll pretty quickly, but don't worry. Don't worry. Everyone has a question feature. That's how you communicate with me today. I'm so bored and I'm so lonely. Mike knows I'm easily get bored and lonely. If no one sends me questions or comments, I can't stand it. So please send me questions and comments. I don't use people's names, so feel free to ask whatever you would like to ask. If you don't like Corey's shirt, that's fine too. I'm not going to tell him who said it. Whatever you want to send, I'm happy to hear it. I really am. We have a lot of videos. Corey, be honest. Have you ever watched one of my videos? Because there's literally 500, 600 hours of me online.
Yeah, I've never watched one.
Have you ever considered sitting with your wife and binging on Ray Dickey videos?
I don't want to get divorced.
Okay. Anyway, for those interested, it's not just me, it's everybody. And there's a lot of them, a lot of Tom ones. Some of them are interesting. Lastly, later today, we are doing a manager leadership. So I'll send you a quick link to that. I should have pulled it out in advance. If you're interested, it's just managers. Most of the managers do the talking. And I'll have like a lawyer in case something comes up. But I love the manager ones that we've been doing. They turned out very surprisingly and very interesting. Next week in South Carolina, we have an expo. That is for something else for the recorded version. We're here where we introduce the panel. And let's start with who I see first, and that is Corey.
Good morning, everyone. Ray, thank you for having me here again. My name is Corey Kravitz. I'm the managing principal of Kovach Schifrin Nesbitt's Florida office. We're a national community association law firm with offices in Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and of course, Florida.
Corey is a huge hockey fan. Corey, true, right?
Very true.
Okay, I like to share little tidbits. Jeremy.
Hi, everybody. Jeremy Fernando. I work at a firm called Herzl Law. We're present in Michigan and Illinois. I represent community associations throughout Illinois, predominantly the Chicagoland area. Happy to be on, Ray.
Jeremy, are you willing to share anything about yourself personally? You don't have to. Now Noelle's turn.
I went to Texas A&M University. I'm going to the game in South Bend, hoping for a win, but I've been a fan of the school for a long time, and they always seem to let me down. So not looking good.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Tom, the doctor.
Hi, I'm Tom Engblom. I do have a doctorate degree. Worked for First Citizens Bank, covered many states, Illinois, Florida, Wisconsin, Minnesota, part of several CAI chapters, and I have a lot of hidden secrets I can tell about Ray in the future.
He's warning me because he knows I know a lot of things about Tom. I will tell you that Tom invites me to ride motorcycles with a bunch of other old guys, and I think it's the worst idea I've ever heard. It is only a matter of time before there's a bunch of old guys that really can't balance and see well decide to get together at expos and go riding motorcycles. It's just, it looks like a disaster ready to happen. Mike.
Hi, everybody. Mike Lezzi with the Acrisure Community Association team. We are a national insurance brokerage that specializes only in community associations and all types of common interest communities. I'm located in the beautiful state of New Jersey. We work in all 50 states, but specifically pretty much Texas and East. Happy to be here. Thanks, Ray.
Mike does not mind me communicating that he's incredibly tall. He's like 10 feet tall. And if I don't have an audio system at one of my live events, we just use Mike. I just tell it to Mike and he projects his voice because he's so tall and so loud. But you, how tall are you? You are super tall.
Yeah, I'm a little taller than 6'8", so I was
Yeah.
a college basketball player, and that is true. Ray does, use me, ask me to volunteer, and help him out in some of the events that we've done over the years. So
I knew he was going to get in there that he was a college basketball player because he was like a really great college basketball player, Jeremy, and he gets it and he loves talking about it because he's proud of it, and you should be. Noel, so great to see you again.
Good to see you again too, Ray. My name is Noelle Hicks. I am with RMWBH in Houston, Texas. We're a Texas-based law firm that practices community association law. And fun fact, I actually got my CCAL last month, so I'm pretty excited about that.
That is pretty. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very much. I love Texas. Where are you in Texas again? What part?
Houston.
Houston? Okay.
Yeah.
One time, like was it Dallas? And I thought it'd be like an hour drive. How far is it?
Absolutely not.
No, it's like 8 hours or something preposterous. I don't know. Okay, so let's start off. I'm just going to keep everybody on. So Tom and Mike, not too much, but we just enjoy watching you guys just sitting there. You will have to deal with hoarders, and it's not easy. One person's trash is another person's treasure. And I think, Noelle, the first thing I would like to do is, and I hope you agree, if you've never experienced this, I don't think people can really grasp how much of a problem this is. And why don't you leave a little room for everybody else, but why don't you give us an example of a situation you may have heard or seen of, so people understand this is a problem.
Yeah, no, I've seen a couple of examples of it myself. And actually, the most recent one was, unfortunately, we had to do an eviction. We did a foreclosure and the owner wouldn't leave the property after that happened. And so when you do an eviction, you have to have someone come and move all of the stuff out of the house, right? So we got pictures of all of the items on their front lawn that they were moving out of the house. And it was tons and tons of stuff. So the constable ended up telling us that these people were hoarders, and it took them almost a week to get everything out of the house.
Jeremy, have you ever experienced a hoarding situation?
I have actually, in college. It's a classic like college thing. But there are a couple of hoarders. This is before I started practicing law, obviously. But there were a couple of hoarders there. And trash just kept piling up. And luckily, I believe they got evicted. But kind of similar to what Noelle was saying, where sheriff had to come in, and it involved pretty heavy duty cleaning up. But as an attorney, we have represented a couple of associations who have had hoarding issues. Luckily, Chicago has what's called the Chicagoland Hoarding Task Force. So it's a good service that you could call. But yeah, no, hoarding is obviously no fun, and obviously it's protected under the FHA. So
Tom, getting ahead of me, Jeremy, but it's okay.
apologies.
Tom, help me out here before I go to Corey. I'm trying to instill in the audience how horrible and disgusting and the level of insanity that is involved. I mean, so far everybody thinks, oh, this person has a little bit too much stuff. Tom, have you ever experienced a hoarding situation in your management career?
I have. It's terrible. Creative issues with bugs, odor, smell. I mean, the whole gamut, and life safety, fire hazard, and everything. It's terrible to deal with.
Corey, scare the audience from me. I really want them to get an idea, because you've been around a while, how horrible this is.
Especially in condominium units, we often find out about the hoarders from the neighboring next door unit, because there's infestations of roaches, rats, mice, feces all over the place from those vermin. If you know the smell emanating from the unit is horrible. And opening the door, it's not uncommon to have. This was more common, maybe years ago, but there would be newspapers piled from floor to ceiling, or magazines from floor to ceiling, and the people. I don't know how they live in the units, but the people living in those units are often sick, not just mentally, but physically ill also from living in that environment. And it's a complete health hazard, like Tom said, from a fire perspective, and also from a biohazard notion.
And I've talked to a lot of managers and boards of dealers. Corey's not exaggerating. When he says floor to ceiling, imagine an apartment with numerous rooms. Noelle's nodding, so she's also aware of this, where there's little walkways that you could barely squeeze through, and literally every inch of the unit or home is full of something, whether it's magazines, newspapers, clothes, and it starts to degenerate, and the people they start to fill up their bathtubs, right, Corey? And their showers, they stop bathing. Do you agree? Am I wrong?
It's disgusting. I've had situations where hoarders, we've sent process servers, and the process servers have told us stories where they answer the door in soiled underwear. They're not even wearing clothes, the hoarders. They're literally in soiled underwear answering the door. And it's a huge mental health and physical health issue.
You did such a good job. Like I've done a million of these, and the soiled underwear story was like the most horrifying picture anyone has ever drew. Thank you. And I've done a lot. You win. I meant that's like, I'm going to use that going forward. That's a winner. Yes, some gross, stinky, smelly, soiled underpants person is going to answer a door with a bunch of rats and rodents and cockroaches running behind them. All right. Fire hazards, locked exits, stacked combustibles, overloaded electrical outlets, rodents, insects. Things start getting moldy. First responders can't get in there if there's a problem. How are they going to get a stretcher in there? But can anyone on the panel guess what? This is a commonly overlooked item. What is the one other item that hoarders can cause an issue with? Anybody? Weight. Structural. They overload the units. They're not meant to have, especially, right, Corey, when it was paper and magazines, it becomes a structural safety issue. Okay, so people hear about hoarders. Noelle, give me a couple of examples how people can hear about how can an association become aware of a hoarder? What are some of the situations?
9 times out of 10, it's the neighboring properties that are going to report that it's a hoarder. And that's actually the only way that I've ever learned about a hoarding situation, because it's never the family, because normally the family doesn't really know about it. So 9 times out of 10, it's someone who has either lived next to them or walked by the property and has seen evidence of hoarding.
I think everybody would agree, right? Because typically we're going to talk about how hoarders have a mental illness, and the lawyers are going to jump all over that. They certainly aren't going to turn themselves in.
Right. I've actually experienced something where the association had no idea that there was a hoarding situation until they moved, and they straight up left everything almost overnight. And the association and the new owners were left to deal with that problem. And they did take about half the stuff out of their unit, but that happened in New Jersey less than probably 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, I had a slide on that actually, where I was surprised to hear, Mike, how often it goes unnoticed, right? If it doesn't permeate outside of the unit, no one is aware of it, and that's
had
pretty
no
scary.
idea.
Yeah, pretty scary for structural issue engineers. So, does anyone else on a panel have anything else to add as far as you can hear about a hoarder? You're going to usually hear about it from another individual because of the smell, the rodents. It's just gross. I think that's about the only way you're going to hear about it. Maybe a family relative could call in, right? Theoretically, maybe. I don't know why they would call the HOA, but we could talk about it. Tom, did you want to add a scenario?
Well, I was just going to say at many associations, they're trying to be proactive with extermination. So they go to the units every other month to spray, or that particular time. And after a couple of months, when people don't let you in, it starts raising a flag. Why can't we get in? Is that person alive? What's going on? And sometimes you'll find out that way.
Yeah, that's a good one we overlooked, right? Maybe there's a leak in the unit they're looking for whatever reason they need to get access and they discover it. Okay, so I'm going to start with Corey and go around the other way. You have discovered. All right, let me start over. Corey, is this any of the association's business? This is one of the tricky questions of the day here. When does this become, is it the association's business? And if not, when does it become so?
Especially in a condo situation, it definitely becomes, because the association has a fiduciary duty to protect the property. And if there are rodents eating through the drywall into the adjacent unit, or there's a fire hazard, or there's noxious odors coming from other apartments, the association has a duty to act and enforce. The governing documents often have restrictions against all those things I just mentioned. So definitely in an HOA, sometimes it's a little bit harder, sometimes a little bit different. But typically in an HOA situation, I'm dealing with this with a community in Sarasota right now. Not only will the inside of the unit be in a state of disrepair and a hoarder situation, but the exterior is usually not maintained either. And that's how you find out typically in an HOA situation.
Now, Jeremy and Noel, I don't want to get into enforcement. We're going to do that in a second here. But once again, Jeremy, and I've seen attorneys have, this is like a gray area. So maybe I'm a hoarder and it hasn't impacted anybody and I've discovered it. Can you run with that, Jeremy, from the legal aspects of it?
It kind of depends on, well, can you kind of rephrase the question? Do you mind?
Where's the line? Let's say I'm a hoarder, but I'm not, I'm not bothering anybody. You walk in my unit and I'm a hoarder, but no one's complained about me.
I mean, I think in most hoarding situations, that's not going to be the case. If there's some trash inside, it's not really affecting anybody. That's one thing. But the hoarding situations that we're discussing here, I mean, these are outrageous situations that are likely going to cause, private nuisance, nauseous and offensive activity. Like Corey was saying, there's going to be restrictions in the governing documents that you can rely on, because most of the time these hoarding situations are not just affecting the people inside. They're affecting everybody within the property if it's a condominium. And then like Corey talked about, if it's an HOA and you have single family homes, it's going to come into the exterior, right? They're not maintaining their outside lawn, their landscaping, whatever.
Don't repeat, Corey.
I'm
I don't like when people repeat.
I'm just saying, very rarely are you going to have a hoarding situation that's not affecting other people, is my bottom line.
Noel, this is a hard question. Let me phrase it in a simple way that you can't possibly, I think, answer it in a short way. When does it become the responsibility of the association if there's a hoarder?
I think that when it affects the associations, what their authority is to enforce or not enforce, right? If it's inside of the person's home and no one knows about it, which it may or may not be the case, but that's not the association's purview, right? Inside the home is not the association's purview, especially if we're talking about single family. But if the rats from someone's home that's a hoarder are affecting the neighbor or other neighbors, then possibly it becomes an HOA situation. Also, though, you have to think about the neighbor to neighbor issue, right? If it's just affecting one neighbor versus several neighbors, then that could be a different story.
So let's assume we're at the point now where the association has determined that they need to be involved in this. So now it needs to be fixed. I don't know. I reported the neighbor next door. It smells, it stinks. The maintenance staff noticed that there's a possible weight issue. For whatever reason, it has become an issue for the association to take action. Mike, I'm going to go to the lawyers on this, but I found this to be the trickiest part with this whole situation. Can you guess what it's going to be?
If it's something would be covered under insurance, if there was a deemed a structural issue.
I'm going to go with Noel and go back the other way now. Noel, I didn't give you much to work with here, but what makes hoarding so difficult? Can you guess what I'm thinking? What I learned about the people in particular? They have
a mental health issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you run with that a little bit and explain how that complicates the issue so much?
Well, yeah, because there's certain protections, right? We have to consider the FHA. We might have to consider, various other things. And so the association really has to toe the line about how they enforce things and what actions they take so that they don't run afoul of, the FHA.
And Jeremy, running afoul of the FHA is something you don't want to do, correct?
Correct.
And why is that?
There can be plenty of penalties that are levied against the association, very costly fines, not something you want to deal with.
And Corey, that's free legal for the, am I wrong? That's for the person you just annoyed, the hoarder. They're going to get that for nothing. And now you're dealing with the government.
So no, because I know all of our property managers know when there's an issue like this to call their attorneys and they have us deal with it so they don't run into those problems.
But we all agree that this is tricky because this could be considered a mental illness and be considered a disability. Tom, very quickly, anything to add if you run into that scenario? Very quickly.
Well, yes, I have. And hearing from all three attorneys, they just reiterated that years ago, my favorite catchphrase was creating a noxious or offensive odor, and that was the catchphrase that I would always put in my letters. How can you prove it? But I would send a letter to those individuals and copy the attorney and stay out of it at that point.
Okay. So I'm going to start with Jeremy. So Jeremy, now it's time to take action. And don't list everything. Just pick one item. What you pick the first item. What would be the first item? The association has received notice. They have a problem. They have to take action. What's the first step?
You're going to document everything. So the first step is sometimes, depending on the reasonableness of the homeowner, you can try and talk to the homeowner, talk to the homeowner's family. That likely is not going to work. So the first step, and unfortunately, this is probably, again, not going to work very well, but you send a demand letter. So at least you're going to start the process off. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings, so you can try and talk to the homeowner, but again, that's likely not going to work. Next step is sending a demand letter. Again, that's probably not likely going to work. You can start to levy fines depending on what your governing documents say about this. And then after that, you can try and go to court and take this issue. But I know that was all the steps. I apologize. But
right.
that was number one.
Okay. So number one is going to be you get the letter out, but let's face it, like you said, good luck. You're dealing with someone with a mental illness. Corey, what's going to be the second step? Or maybe you want to call it the first step or whatever you need to call it. You do your thing. Hold on, Tom. Everybody wait. Everybody hold on a second. Tom has something to say. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm curious at what point in time would they suggest that the health department be contacted?
You're getting so far. What is going on with you today? You're getting so far ahead of me. We're going to get there.
Okay.
We're going to get there. I'm letting the lawyers get us there. Corey, step number 2. And now that Tom mentioned it, why don't you talk about that too? When do you call? Go ahead.
When I do step 1 and step 2 kind of simultaneously, I recommend it because part of the problem is to enforce the governing documents against someone who's incapable of complying with them for whatever reason. If they're an older person and they have no family or whatnot, even if they wanted to clean it up, they just physically couldn't do it or they couldn't afford to do it. You have to, as a attorney for the association, you have to balance. Yeah, we can send letters, we can file lawsuits, ask for court orders for injunctive relief, ordering them to remove it, and ordering them to pay our fees. But if they can't afford to pay to have the stuff cleaned out or they're incapable of doing it, the court process is only going to rack up fees for the association. And so that's where it goes, that's why, like Tom said, you get the health department or the local authorities involved. 1, it doesn't cost the association anything, and 2, they have the power to actually condemn the unit and possibly shut it down depending upon the severity. The problem is if you're in that period, in that area where it's not super severe, there's not feces all over the walls and a health hazard, then they won't do anything. So that's where that gray area becomes problematic.
All right, and Mike, I'm going to get to you on the insurance. Noel, okay, so we've talked about some first steps, letters, which everyone agrees they're not going to be effective. You get the health department involved. Maybe the health department's too busy. I've heard that plenty times during these live streams. Some cities are just not going to help you out at all. Talking doesn't help. You've tried everything. Fining doesn't help. What's next? And if you want to backtrack on, and you have some other first steps, by all means, please include them also.
No, I agree with the first steps that everyone else mentioned, but I usually like to recommend that not just the association try to contact any local authorities, but that other homeowners do that same thing as well, because the more noise you make, the more perhaps the city will come out or the county will come out and actually do something about it. We have to keep in mind the city or the county, they're busy too. So one hoarder is not something that they're super, moved by. But also sometimes associations have self-help provisions, and there's certain things that they can do in order to kind of like mitigate the issues. And so they might be able to take those steps to actually, take some action on their own behalf to, I don't know, pest control or clean up things that are coming outside of the property and that sort of thing.
There is a point, Noel, right? I've heard where an association can go in on their own and clean it up, right? But that would be only after a court order. Is that accurate?
No, not necessarily, right? There might be some emergency situations, like in a condo, for example, if the status of the inside of the unit is having an effect on other aspects of the property, and that might cause an emergency, then the association might have the authority to bust into the unit and kind of handle what's going on in there, but only to a certain extent, right? We don't want them going in and substantially altering anything that might create some liability against the association.
Jeremy, how about you? What about situations where the association can get more aggressive without a court order?
Yeah, I think there are oftentimes in the governing documents, like Noel was referencing, that are going to provide the association with the opportunity to come in and enter the unit. But you got to make sure that, especially in Illinois, that you provide notice and an opportunity to be heard, because you can't just barge in. But normally the provisions that I've reviewed, you're going to have that opportunity to come in. And like Noel said, again, you can't just totally repair the place, but you're going to have that opportunity, especially if it's causing issues with the common elements or other neighbors as well.
Corey, add anything that we forgot, but you've finally reached the point. You've gone to court, didn't reach the point where the association felt they could take this action on their own. And what happens? First of all, is it realistic to assume that this court situation is going to get resolved quickly because it's a health issue? And second, what would be some of is it called regress that an association would get from the court? Did I say that? Was I close?
Redress, but yeah, so the court will, at least in Florida, often issue injunctive relief authorizing the association to do or ordering the individual to do something. If they don't do it, then it creates additional problems. In Florida, the association will also be entitled to its prevailing party attorney's fees and costs, which is interesting because the power to remove the person from the unit is often stronger through foreclosure than any other mechanism. So if fees and costs are assessed and able to be assessed to that unit as an individual assessment, then you can start the foreclosure process and actually get them out that way. Usually the foreclosure process, at least in Florida, is very strong and favorable in favor of the association. It's its strongest power.
Interesting. So you can just, the goal is just to get rid of them. So maybe are you saying you could find another angle?
Sometimes
you don't want to say that, but I can, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be inhumane or not passionate, but at the end of the day, when costs are being incurred by the association, that requires all the other people in the community to pay for it, which isn't fair, and that's why that power is so strong.
So best practices, document everything, get the professionals involved early. Man, you don't want to mess with this on your own because this has got about 1,000 minefields. Approach with empathy, like Corey said, these people do have a mental illness for the most part. They can't help themselves. They really can't. And then have clear nuisance safety and maintenance clauses in the governing documents. Panel, are you okay with me communicating that? Okay. Mike, insurance is going to cover this all, right? It's not going to cost the association anything. And then what happens?
Unfortunately,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to do a two-parter. And then if that's not, and what happens if the association doesn't do anything and the building collapses or the floor does?
Well, you could have several issues in both scenarios. In regards to insurance, it depends on what type of claim that could possibly arise. Obviously, if you're not following the professional's advice, your legal counsel, you could be exposing yourself to a D&O discrimination suit, which we've seen a lot. Somebody might feel that they're being picked on or offended or, something along those lines. And then the board is making this decision on behalf of the association in its best interest, but that person may not agree with that regardless. So that's certainly something that you'd want to check all those boxes to prevent that type of loss from or claim from being filed. But from a property standpoint, a lot of these issues could arise from maintenance, right? Owners have maintenance responsibilities, upkeep of the unit. So maintenance is not insurance, and it's not something that would be covered under insurance. Now, I would venture to say in a situation that there would be a possible building collapse due to, a weight issue or something structural. If it was sudden and accidental, I'd say that there's a more than fair chance that would be a covered claim. But in the sense of, hey, we have something structural here, it's going to cost $30,000 to fix, there is no collapse, that would not be covered.
Tom, before I go to the attorneys to kind of wrap us up here, once again, I think this is probably one of the most horrible, toughest scenarios, and if an association could find themselves in, I don't think the audience is going to believe how extreme this gets. Do you agree, Tom?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been in units that as we stated before, the smell, the odor. I mean, you're afraid to go in there because you don't know what's in there crawling, and it goes from one unit to another. That's the problem, and it costs the association more money with extermination and other items as well.
Jeremy, anything we haven't spoken about, but this could be a really tough one on an association to solve, or am I wrong? It's going to cost a lot of money and take a lot of time, and it's got a lot of minefields.
Yeah, for sure, especially in a condominium association where everyone lives on top of each other. This is ripe for issues. But I think we've kind of touched base on everything, right? Document everything, try to get, social services involved as much as possible, just try to make as much noise as possible. It's kind of everything.
Noel, the poor board, right? They're getting phone calls you probably have seen it, right? Why isn't this being fixed? Why, the poor person that lives with this person. How long have you seen some of these items stretch out for?
A very long time. It takes a very long time sometimes, because a lot of times the things that the association is trying to do to remedy the situation, they don't work, or it's taking a long time for the city to respond, or no family member responds or anything like that. So it can take a long time.
Like years, or like
possibly, but I think the best thing for the association to do is just kind of keep everybody updated on like the status of things, right? Yeah. Sometimes during their open board meetings, they have to say something for transparency's sake, or they're definitely going to have an uprising in the community.
All right, I'm going to go to Corey on something you said, so feel free to interrupt me, Noel. Okay, you just brought up something interesting, Corey. I don't want to get sidetracked on a different topic here, but Noel brought up something very interesting and great advice. You want to keep the community updated, but then my first idea was, and I know you're not saying this, Noel, I'm just saying it to be devil's advocate here because that's my job. You need to be careful what you communicate also to the community, because could be a protected class and somebody with a disability. I don't know. Am I close?
No, because the community knows what's going on. It's not uncommon for these people to be sleeping in their cars outside in the parking lot. The community knows what's going on. What the community wants to know is what's being done to stop it or fix it, and that's what they want to be kept abreast on. They know the issue. They want to know what's going to be done about it.
Okay. Noel, anything to backtrack on that, since I kind of jumped on your thought there?
No, yeah, I think you're right. You have to be cautious not to say anything negative, right? But you're just alerting to the association the community, what steps the association is taking to try to remedy the situation.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for people that have to deal with this. So, and I feel like people sometimes think I'm trying to scare them, and I guess I am. But I always hear the worst case scenarios, right? And so do you guys. So this could be a really bad situation, and it's horrible. Check with your professionals. I mean, I don't know how many times in this case we have to say it, right? Don't mess around with this on your own. Call the attorney. Okay. We got through that. Awesome. I wish I could like have a smelly example, but Tom, we're going to do a quick panel question. You guess in your mind. Okay. Don't give us the answer. We're going to move really quick. And audience, if you want to add, use your question feature. And you could use your own example. What was the worst thing Tom has smelled in the HOA industry? Corey, I'm just going to, what is the worst thing you've heard a manager has smelled? Do you have a story? Maybe you don't.
I mean, I think the soiled underwear is pretty bad there, but but common, most common in Florida is mold,
Okay.
or unfortunately, because we have such an older population, is unfortunately decaying bodies. Sometimes they have estranged family members and nobody checks on them, and they've fallen and died, and nobody has realize they're gone until the next door neighbor smells something.
This is like the third time during a live stream you've mentioned decaying bodies. I don't want to get into it, but you must have experienced this scenario with one of your associations and it was left on you. Okay. Jeremy, really quick, because we want to get to the police routine, but what's the most smelly thing you think a manager or board member?
I mean, we live in Chicago, and Chicago is not exactly the cleanest place.
No.
So there can be tons of trash everywhere at all times, but I'll
Noel,
kind of go with it. Nothing's going to beat the decaying bodies.
Can you be more creative? Can you think of anything?
Yeah, so in Texas, of course, there's a lot of livestock, animals running around. Part of the reasons why we're trying to prevent the legislature from allowing people to just have chickens without any sort of, guardrails is because chickens and animals like that can smell, especially when you're living very close to someone who has them. So that's been one of the worst things that I've encountered.
Okay, Mike, really quick, because I want to move on.
Broken sewage pipe backs up into a unit. Can't get much worse than that.
I knew Mike would go. All right. Tom, what is your answer?
I have to go with the majority, decaying bodies.
What? Oh, man. I've done this on previous live streams, and backed up trash compactors, rotting food in units, flooded unit with old carpet and mildew, septic system overflows, food left in the clubhouse fridge, sweaty guys at the gym, open diapers in the outside garbage, and dog poop in units. All right. With that being said, it's a real high quality show we got going on here, isn't it, Noel? All right. Let's try to move on to something that's a little bit easier to work with, and it isn't so unbelievably gross. Police requests and legal and ethical factors. And I'm going to poll the audience. Let me find my poll. Audience, I'm going to give you an example first before I do it. Oh, I didn't put wait, do I have the poll in here? Let me get it. Sorry. Oh, I didn't. Oh, here it is. Audience, the police, let's say the gated community. It's condominium building. The police come up. You're the manager, you're on duty, and say, hey, we've been looking for Bob. Have you seen Bob around? Is Bob, if he's around, can you tell us where he is right now? Is he in the pool area? Do you or do you not say anything? Is that part of your job? Do you let the police in? Do you deny police entry because you don't want to get in trouble? Do you talk to Bob about it, or do you take them to Bob? Ask what it's in regard to, or do you give Bob a warning? So I'm going to end the poll pretty quick. And okay, I'm 50%. We don't have a lot of people who did the poll, but 50% said let in, and 50% said ask what it's in regard to. All right, I'm going to let Corey go first on this one. Corey, what do you think about this?
I don't like having the property managers, let's say it's an on-site property manager, have to make a split decision on protecting someone's rights or this or that. I'm more of, if there's an opportunity, this was a big issue in terms of, ICE raids. And, I know some people were asking, well, do they have a warrant? what type of warrant. I don't think that's the job of a property manager to make a decision based on paperwork provided by the police. I would, if there's an opportunity to call the attorney and work it out, then great, but usually time doesn't permit that. So I generally would, if I don't want them making decisions, I would let them in and let the attorneys handle it after the case afterward.
Okay. And Noel, I want to give you some freedom on this because there's so many different scenarios here, right? The police want to gain access for a whole bunch of different reasons, and you're on duty at the front desk. And I'm trying to talk about how can the association get themselves in trouble here in any way, or should they just do whatever the police say?
I mean, I think they need to go ahead and do what the police say, but at the same time, maybe you need to be making a phone call to your council, your association's council, to kind of, ask them what to do in that situation. But I wouldn't want them to obstruct, to prevent the police for any reason unless they thought it was a good reason. I don't know. That is a kind of a sticky situation.
This could be like a state by state thing. Do you guys agree too, like politically, about allowing the police access? I'm not legally, just like the whole, well, whatever. Jeremy, I'm going to put you in a tough spot. I'm going to give you a scenario. The police I'm going to throw one right. The police show up at the front desk and they want to have the manager take them to Bob. Bob's in the pool area and they want them to point Bob out. What do you think?
I'd ask they have a warrant to search the property. If they don't, then if it's a gated community, right, and they can't get access to the pool without going through a secure door, then I would say no, unless you have a proper warrant, we're not letting you in.
All right, so Tom, I'm going to go back to the attorneys and play devil's advocate, but the direction I'm going to go in is like I wouldn't know what a real warrant looks like compared to another one. But go ahead, Tom.
That's fair too.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you, Ray. I mean, a manager isn't an attorney. They don't have the skill set to know what a warrant is or anything of that type. So they're going to be intimidated by that police officer and more or less say, go ahead, because they're concerned about what's going to happen if they get repercussions for not letting them in.
Mike, it's a little unfair because I've done this session like 1,000 times, but one thing that I'm going to go back to the attorneys on, and you guys can comment on both items. You can always tell the police no, because believe me, if they really have a right to go in, you're not going to stop them. They're just going to go. They're going to go in anyway. If they don't have a right to go in, they're going to know that too, and they're maybe not going to go in. Mike, what do you think the attorneys are going to say about that?
About them going in
About
regardless?
the police are going to go in. If you tell them no and they have a right to go in, they're not going to let you stop them. But if they don't have a right, they're not going to go in.
I think that it's all situationally based. I think that
Right.
the attorneys would certainly want them to follow the letter of the law, so to speak, right? And if not, they'd have a big issue on their hands. But I do think that they have to somewhat protect their association in the sense of, following the right rules. And as Jeremy said, if there's a warrant,
Right.
I don't know. I think it could just be the situation, why they're there, timing. I think this is really one that could go a million different ways.
All right, Corey. So I threw out there that, look, you just say no. And if they have a right to go in, they're just going to kick the door down anyway.
But you don't know what's going on. You don't know if there's a domestic situation ongoing and someone's life is in danger or property is in danger. So by saying no, you could create liability for the association if somebody is injured as a result of you saying no. There's nothing in any governing documents, at least in Florida, the authority that the association has is what's in the governing documents. And there's no provision in any governing documents I've ever seen that says you can deny access to the police. Again, the legal system is set up to deal with, the fallout of any kind of police investigation or arrest. I would not, one, I don't want to put my property managers on the spot. It's not fair to them. And two, you don't know what's going on. And in the interest of public safety, I would always let them in.
Noel, someone is commenting it's private property. And actually, I live in a high rise. This isn't public property, right? Why don't they need a search warrant? I mean, what right, like if I'm at the pool, what right does the manager have to let the police in to find me? Isn't it the same, like this is my home?
Well, but it's the police though, right? So I think also the association's duty was, speaking in single family terms, is to rely on authority and experts, right? So if they're relying on a police officer who is an authority figure, having the ability to come into this property and do whatever it is that they need to do, then that takes away liability from the association. So, they can make that argument that, it was a police officer. We were supposed to let them in. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty good argument, actually.
So I think what you're saying, Noel, and you correct me because I get this wrong all the time. You're better off taking your chances and letting them in than getting the association sued for not, compared to having an owner sue you for giving them access.
I mean,
Yes?
I think so. And then, like what Corey said too, you never know what the police are coming there for. So you don't want to get sued, more than once because you didn't allow a police officer to come in to prevent a domestic violence situation.
I feel like the domestic violence was a little bit of an unfair example though, Corey, because yes,
I mean,
and there's already laws in place that you can't stop them anyway. They can enter anybody's private home if there's domestic violence. I'm trying to throw things at the managers and the boards where there's these tricky little scenarios where it's a gray area. Obviously, if there's a shooting or there's a fire or they get a report of something, they're going to come in. They can come into my house if they want to. Jeremy,
Yeah,
go ahead, Mike.
I'm saying I've seen it actually most recently as last week in one of my associations where there was a wellness check, and it was a safety check on somebody. It was for a renter, and it turns out they did pass away. So the police had to break the door down. According to the documents, that is the responsibility of the owner of the unit, but it obviously caused a little bit of an uproar in the association just because of police activity. But it was, due to a wellness check, and unfortunately, that person had passed away.
Jerry, I think Jeremy, we have to recognize the fact too, like Corey's saying, right? Like for the manager or the person at the front desk, having like 3 armed police officers just asking you to let them in could be very intimidating. And is that itself, I think Noel may have been trying to say this and I'm too thick to get it. Is that a defense in itself? Was that what you were trying to say, Noel, before I have Jory expand on is that a defense to let them in because they're authority figures automatically?
I don't think it's automatically, but in Texas, the duty for an association is that they are allowed to rely on experts or authority figures in order to, do certain things. So that's why I was going with that. It lessens the liability if someone was to file a lawsuit.
Okay. Jeremy, additional commentary on that?
No, I think Noel makes a really good point, and so does Corey with regards to, the extreme circumstances. In my mind, I'm thinking, it's just Bob is sitting at the pool is behind a closed door. I wouldn't want the police just kind of roaming around without a reason. But in some of those circumstances, yeah, if there's 3 armed police officers and they're like, hey, guy just robbed the jewelry store downtown, we're looking for him, then by all means let him in.
Exactly.
It just really depends on the it really depends on the situation.
All right, let me do one more situation because I can't help myself. Corey, if the police want to look at Bob's car, they just want to look at it. They don't, they're not an emergency. He didn't commit a robbery or anything. They don't like Bob. Bob's been getting a lot of tickets and he just doesn't pay they just don't like him. This happens, right? So they show up at the condominium and they want to be let into the private garage. And they just want to look at Bob's car because somebody ran over a bunch of bushes the other day and they want to see Bob's car. But Bob's car is technically on private property. What about that scenario?
The association is not Bob's defense attorney. So let them go ahead and look at the car. And if Bob's defense attorney thinks it's an unlawful search or seizure, then let him raise that defense. But this is not the job of a property manager. This is not taught in any CAM class. It's not fair to them. And again, if they're able to go ahead and give their association's attorney a call and get the protection from inquiring with your experts, if time permits, that's the best advice I could give.
All right, Noel, I'm gonna stop on this in a second here, but let me ask you this: and it's so unfair, like to put you on the spot like this. So by all means, just say, Ray, that's preposterous. Give me a scenario where you don't think the manager or board member should let the police in. You want to think about it?
Yeah, give me a minute to think about that for a second.
Okay, I'll let Jeremy think about it. I'll let Corey think about it. Tom, in the meantime, somebody said that you should have an organ donor card on your driver's license if you're riding around on a motorcycle. By the way, that came in earlier today. Are you still riding? Well, they're thinking, are you still riding your motorcycle around? Seriously? Have you
No,
stopped?
I sold all 3 of the Harleys and bought a golf cart. So I'm
Oh
living
my
the
gosh.
dream.
And then I have a very technical legal question. I don't even understand the question. All right. Noel, if you don't have it, maybe you can't think of it. It's fine. It's so
Yeah,
unfair.
I was thinking about something like, I don't know, if there was like a harassment situation or something going on. Maybe I watched too many movies. I don't know, but I can't really think of a reason why you wouldn't let the police in if they were just coming to either, execute a search warrant, look for someone. I'm not sure. Maybe in the situation you said where you don't want them just like looking around in someone's car. That's kind of weird, but I don't know.
Jeremy, how about if an owner comes to the association and says, I don't want you to answer any questions about me to the police. I don't want to let the police gain access to me in the condominium unless it qualifies under one of these criminal acts.
It's not really
Okay.
the point of the condominium association. That's why I would tell property managers to ask if they have a warrant or not. But if they don't, again, yeah, police can gain entrance if they want to. They're going to barge past, but I would ask for a warrant.
Okay. Before I go to Corey, I'll go to closing thoughts on this. Anything you guys want to say on it? Mike, any insurance issues? What about if Bob sues the association? Okay, under one of these scenarios. Coverage?
Going back to it depends on the situation. Obviously, if somebody was injured due to police rushing on site and they fell down, you could have a bodily injury claim. But if somebody feels that you're letting the police in that is, infringing on their rights, that, could potentially be a director's and officer's claim. So I think it just depends on the situation. But I will say from a best practices standpoint, consult with your legal counsel, but always document everything. I think that's huge and extremely important.
So most likely there'll be defense coverage.
I would think so. Yes.
Yeah, because there's going to be no time to consult for the most part. All right, Corey, before you do closing thoughts, here's a legal, I don't even know what this means. I'm reading exactly as I see it here. The size of what is considered curtilage is the question. I know Corey's laughing at me because I did probably such a bad job pronouncing it, but it's okay. The size of what is considered curtilage is the question, and what possible authority does an employee of a condo or HOA association have to accede to a state request for entry? First of all, explain the question because I don't understand it, and then give us your commentary. And did I pronounce it right?
I don't know. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I think the question might be, are there statutes, maybe like a guard gate access? For instance, if a process server is coming onto a property to serve papers, there's state law in Florida that says the association has to let all process servers in. So, maybe maybe they're trying to, and there may be for police also. I don't know off the top of my head, but maybe that's what they were alluding to, is any kind of specific law or statute that requires access to the property. Maybe not necessarily the particular unit, but at least to the condominium property or community property.
Let me send them a text to see if they want to ask themselves via their mic. Noel, I didn't. Does curtilage mean anything? And can you run with it? What does curtilage mean?
I have no idea, unfortunately.
Okay. How about, do you want to take a jab at this question, or do you not understand it?
Yeah, I need some additional info for the question. It kind of seems like they're asking like a common area versus individual unit question, which would make sense, right? A police would be able to gain entry to common areas that are owned by the association. They might have a little bit more trouble getting access to, excuse me, individual units, and we can't rely on make associations do that. We can't make managers.
Hold on.
We can't.
Noel, please finish. Hold on, Tom. Noel, I cut you off, and
no, that's okay.
I apologize. What was your last thought?
we can't give managers that much. We can't make them do things like that or make those decisions. So it's just not fair to them.
Tom.
I think what they're alluding to is I'm thinking of high rise in Chicago with the doorman. So they come in, the doorman's there. Now they're in the building. What does that door person do? Do they let them up to the unit? Do they call? What's their responsibility? I think that's the avenue that they're going with. 'Cause
Jeremy.
that happens a lot in Chicago.
Jeremy, any idea?
When I hear curtilage, I think more of like a backyard or kind of an extension of the property. And again, and I'm not a criminal law expert, but I'm pretty sure you do need a search warrant in order to get into those and into those areas, or some sort of warrant. But when I think of curtilage, Tom, when I think of curtilage, I actually think of single family homes and backyards and whatnot. But again, I'm not a criminal law expert, but it's kind of an extension of the property.
Curtilage, according to Chat GBT, which is always dangerous, curtilage is a legal term that refers to an area of land immediately surrounding a dwelling, which is considered part of the home and for certain legal purposes. It's where a homeowner has a reasonable expectation of privacy. All right, let's move very quickly because we got like 3 minutes left. Corey, does that change you want to offer in commentary on this?
And it's more of an HOA situation, and that's not the association's duty to manage that. It's the lot.
Okay.
So that's the homeowner's responsibility, and that's between the police and the homeowner, and the association has no role there.
Jeremy, I think it was Corey brought this up, and I thought it was interesting. Who are the guys that come and give you the subpoenas? What are they called?
So servers?
Yes. How about letting them in? Do you have to let them in? Like, I've been ducking this guy for like months, and then all of a sudden you let him in and he sees me at the pool.
Yeah, if they have the proper papers, you have to let them in.
Corey?
In Florida, it's the law. They have to be granted access.
Noel?
Yeah, and I've had a couple of associations try to refuse to let them in, which I've had to just politely tell them, no, you got to let them go ahead and serve their papers.
Wow. I thought you guys were going to tell me something different. Okay. Let's go to closing thoughts. Let me find that. Tom, really, really quick, because we got a short amount of time here. Any commentary on today?
Always refer to your experts. Let the police in, and you'll be fine.
Mike.
I think documentation is extremely important with both topics that we talked about, and specifically the hoarding situation. So I would just say over document, make sure you keep track of everything, or log.
Noel, someone is saying don't let them in, videotape it and put it on YouTube and get a lot of links, a lot of clicks.
Let's not.
Closing thoughts?
Yeah, I know. Kind of on top of what everyone else is saying, just kind of make sure that you look outside the box a little bit, especially when we're dealing with things like hoarders. You don't want to always just go directly to legal counsel. Maybe try to find those other resources that might be helpful to kind of get some actual results.
Jeremy.
No, nothing further from what everybody else has said. They've all said it really well.
Corey, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think it's sometimes unfair how I kind of like push you guys into these topics with these scenarios that you really can't, you know what I'm getting at here, right? But that's the industry we're in.
It's a messed up industry. But these things, nothing we haven't talked about today is really that far-fetched. Today was actually, stuff really happens. I'm dealing with these situations not on a daily basis, but they happen all the time. The one thing I did want to close with is that, at least in Florida, for mental health issues, Florida does have a law. It's called a Baker Act, where the person can be taken into custody for mental evaluation temporarily if there is that issue also, and that's to protect the safety of that individual.
Let's see really quick. Well, I lost that. It doesn't matter. I wanted to say I know we have our next live stream is on the 25th, and I am going to do a better job on keeping up on the getting the information out to people, because that was a couple of people were complaining about it. Let me see if I can find it really quick here. Tom, where are you going to be next?
I'm going to be in Houston on Tuesday to teach my CMCA review.
Okay.
And Somerville, South Carolina, a week from today.
And
About
Tom's
20.
available to stop in and visit anyone, just so you guys know. No, I'm kidding. All right. September 25th. Noel, you're going to like this title. Secrets attorneys want boards and managers to hear.
I love that.
Are there going to be? There are
There's
some,
so
right?
many secrets. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I love it. And I thank you for helping me out. Sometimes Corey doesn't help me out too much, like getting people at the next, but you did a really good job.
I got you.
Corey, thank you so much. I do appreciate you so much. Jeremy, I appreciate you. Noel, I appreciate you. Mike, I appreciate you. Tom, I've known you too long, but I still appreciate you every day. And I appreciate our audience, and thanks for putting up with my questions. Bye, everybody.